My guest today on Life Stories is Bob Love. Bob was born without arms, but went on to win 1 gold, 2 silver and a bronze competing at the World Bowls Championship. Bob says his greatest achievement was the bronze medal that he won at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014, and more about that later. This inspirational life story began 61 years ago in Birmingham, and now it's a very warm welcome to Bob Love. Bob, thanks for joining us. So tell us about growing up in Lozells, Birmingham, back in the 1950s.
Well, it wasn't a very salubrious area at the time, quite poor. My dad used to work for BRS, then National Freight. My mother was a cleaner. I was treated, from what I remember, no different to any of the other siblings that we had at the time.
One brother and
at
two
the time
sisters.
At the time I had one brother and one half-brother. Yeah. Oh, sorry, one sister and one half-brother.
You were born without arms. Now, what reason was given to your parents at the time by the doctors?
There was no specific reason given. They said it was congenital deformity. It wasn't thalidomide, because in general, I'm about 7 years their senior.
So that's a very seems like a very generic reason. Have you ever been tempted to ask more, to find out more about that?
Personally, no, because it wouldn't change what I am, who I am, what happened then or what happened after. So, no, not really.
And as you were growing up and with your siblings, how did you manage, or how did you think you were managing, because they don't have any disabilities, so when you were playing games, when you were doing normal activities in the home, did you think you were different?
No. As I say, everything in the house was everybody was treated exactly the same. So if I wanted to join in with games, maybe I had to do it a different way. Maybe they had to do that to me, but I was never, ever felt left out.
So even without thinking about it, presumably, I'm guessing this, that you just found ways, you found shortcuts. You can possibly begin to spot that others were doing things in a different way,
Yeah.
but you found your way.
That's right, but most of my life has been about adapting to doing things. So yes, that would have been the case. And just a short story. My younger sister, in fact, my daughter, when they started nursery school, they started taking the shoes and socks off and doing things with the feet. Teachers couldn't understand that.
Oh, I see. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they grew out of that, but the teachers thought there was something wrong until it was explained to them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And you went to a special school in Erdington. How different was it? I mean, did you begin to feel different when you started being with other school children?
No, because everybody at that school was the same. They all had disabilities, so nobody felt different to anybody else. It wasn't as if you was in a sole disabled person in an able-bodied world, because everybody was the same.
And was that the normal curriculum, or were you given special lessons on how to cope with any specific disability?
That would depend on what disability we had. I don't think my disability is severe. There were other people, other children that had what I consider severe disabilities, weren't able to move a lot, needed almost 24/7 assistance during the day. So they obviously, but everybody still mucked in with everybody else. They didn't feel that they were better than anybody else because their disability was not so bad.
And did you find that relations and extended family and family friends, did you ever sense that they were looking at you differently? I mean, by the time you began to recognise that there were differences, were you comfortable with that? Did you ever have to break the ice in any situations?
When I was younger, no, I don't. But we're talking about human nature here. People will react differently. One person will say, "Oh, what a shame." Other person will say, "Well, just let him get on with it." You can't cater for everybody's feelings and assumptions and attitudes. You just get on with it.
And there was never any attempt, or was there, to try and fit you with any special paraphernalia?
I went to Queen Mary's Hospital in Roehampton, London, when I was 4. I was one of the youngest patients there to be fitted with artificial limbs. I had those limbs all through school, and as soon as I left school, I didn't wear them again, basically because they were, at that time, and I understand and accept that they're much better now, but at that time they were uncomfortable, and I could do most of the things anyway without them.
But was there almost a regime when you were at that school that you should wear them?
Yes, it was
an expectation.
Yes, you were encouraged to do it because I don't know. Maybe at that time, again, we're talking about the 60s. It was the norm to be able to do things with arms.
So you went from the school in Erdington to to a college, didn't you, to start thinking about a career? Tell us about that experience.
I went to Portland Training College. It was a natural succession from school. If you obviously couldn't go straight into employment, so I did 12 months further education. Then on the assessment week, which we had before I even started the college, you tried lots of different courses. One of them, they actually tried me on watchmaking. I don't know why they tried me on watchmaking, but that didn't last, obviously. I ended up doing 6 months on an office practice course, which is a bit more suitable, I think.
And then when you left school or college at that point, what was your first job?
My first job had nothing to do with offices. They actually found a job for me as a security person. And all it was sitting at a desk or sitting in a kiosk to make sure that the people that passed in and out each day or during the day had passes. Complete waste of time. But it was a job. It earned me a bit of cash.
Now, I know that you're a competitive person. Let's move on to sport, which I know you've been absolutely mad about all your life. I believe you're a Villa fan, aren't you?
I am, indeed.
You are. Born not far from the Villa ground.
That's true.
So, your first sport, you used to play football with your dad?
Yeah. I can remember me and my dad going to the local park, just have a kick around. That's where it all started. Then obviously my brother came along. It was a few more people. And football was everything at the time.
And what other sports did you play as a youngster?
Well, nothing really until, other than at school, we did swimming, obviously, and running. So that was part of the sports curriculum, or any other sport that we thought we could be good at. Or rather, should I say, I thought I could be good at. And those were the two at the time.
And we mentioned that you were competitive. Did you start thinking, I want to be absolutely at the top of the tree in terms of winning and getting medals and treating this as a very important part of your life?
Well, it's been indicated that sport has always been very important, and it has to be competitive for me. Not for everybody, obviously, but I like a competitive edge. Not necessarily to get to the top, but I don't like taking part in sport for the sake of taking part in sport. There has to be a goal, if you like.
So as you moved on, athletics became an important part, and the swimming, which you mentioned. And this requires, if you're going to get to senior club level or to move on to other competitions, you've got to do a lot of training.
Yeah, I was training probably six times a week, probably 5 times running and 3 or 4 swimming. I wasn't working at that time, so I had the time to give. But that was hard. That's when you could take part in more than one sport at the top level. That's now changed.
So tell us about the medals that you got from swimming in particular, wasn't it, at that time?
Yeah, I did. I entered the first swimming one. I think was in. Let me think. Well, Sweden was one world championship that I entered, and I got medals in medley relays. That was interesting, being part of a team again, but still wanting to win. The competitive edge never changes. But when you're in a team, it becomes even more important because you don't let anybody down.
And so this goes all the way through your 20s. You were involved with archery,
yeah.
You were involved with athletics and then swimming and going around, well, many different places and abroad as well.
Yeah.
But I sense that slowly but surely, and maybe this coincides with you getting married in your early 30s,
yeah.
excuse me, then you move across slowly but surely to bowls, which some people think is a very genteel game, but in fact it's played by all ages,
Yes.
and it's very competitive. But what was the inspiration to move across to bowls?
Well, as you said, I was doing swimming and running up until early 30s. That became a bit tedious. I stopped enjoying the training. So I moved on to a sport that I thought I could compete at a decent level, because I knew somebody who was already with the same disability could bowl. The method he used, I couldn't adapt, so I had to find my own way.
And we'll hear more about that in part 2. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Life Stories. Today I'm in conversation with international sportsman Bob Love. So Bob, before the break we were talking about your transition across to bowls. Some people think it's a genteel sport, but it's not really, is it? All ages and open to everyone.
Yeah, that's correct, yes. First started at a club that I used to belong to, a multi-sports club in Birmingham called Birmingham Meercats. They did a lot of different sports themselves, and they used to enter competitions against other clubs within the region. One of those sports would be bowls. That's when I really got into the game first of all.
Any one person inspire you to take it up?
A young person that I knew that with the same disability that would bowl with his feet, and although I couldn't adapt to his method, I had to find my own way. But once I did, there was no problem.
So this is really the big question. How do you bowl when you don't have arms?
Right, I can demonstrate.
I was going to
if you
say,
wish.
yeah, talk us through it
Okay.
and demonstrate it
Well,
at the same time.
Outside, I need to wear a foot aid, because obviously my method indoors, I'm not able to push the bowl over grass, especially in this country, will go nowhere. So this is actually over 30 years old, with that one simple adaptation which was done last year for the
Who made
Commonwealth
that?
Games. This was made by the Selly Oak Limb Fitting Centre, and this adaptation was done by a gentleman at Loughborough University. So the bowl goes on top. Hopefully pointing in the right
The
direction.
wood. Do you still call it wood?
I call it bowl,
Okay.
but yes, it can still be called wood. And then it's released off the top.
Excellent. Right. And so you've got to develop your skills. What's the process then? Eyes,
It's line and length. that's what
line
they
and
call it,
length.
Yeah, line and length. So make sure you give it enough green for
Yes.
it to come in, and then make sure it's got the right amount of power behind it to get to the jack.
Now, you say that this aid was made at Selly Oak
Yeah.
with an add-on from obviously a very clever person
Yes,
at Loughborough,
indeed, yeah.
Loughborough University. Now, do other men and women with your disability around the world have something very similar? I mean, is this accepted internationally when you're in
Yeah,
competitions?
there are other bowls aids. For instance, there's one called the bowl arm, which is an extension for people that can't grip a bowl. So it would pick it up as a trigger mechanism, and then they would release it with their arm that way. That can be done either in a wheelchair or from a standing position. That's the most popular one that's used. I haven't seen another one of these, but they do have to be sanctioned by the international bowls.
And how does that work? Is there like a committee that looks
Yeah,
at all the
An
different
international
aids?
committee. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Is there any tension on these committees where somebody is denied
Well,
the use of
it'll
an
be the
aid?
same committee that basically puts disabled competition is broken into categories depending on ability. Used to be disability, now it's ability. So if somebody has a disability that is deemed a little more difficult than someone else's, they will go into a different class. So it'll be that committee that decides about the bowls aids as well.
Does this ever cause a problem, like
Yes.
somebody appeals against it?
Yeah, there's been people that have actually entered international competition, taken part, been queried by somebody from another country and been thrown out.
Gosh, the
Devastating.
politics.
Devastating, yeah.
Goodness me. So you take up bowls, and by this time you're 30-ish. 31?
Yeah.
Yes. So you start at club level. Now, are you playing against abled players? Is there a mixture of people you're playing
Um,
with
within-
or against at this point? With or against at this point?
Within most clubs now, thankfully, there are quite a few disabled members within an able-bodied club, but they bowl at the same in the same competitions against each other, and there's no difference, which is the way it should be, because bowls is one of the few sports that most disabilities can compete in on an equal term to an able-bodied.
Give us an example of another sport where this happens.
I'm not sure that there probably is one that would fit in so well as bowls does.
So I was going to say, if you like, bowls is the leader in a sport, in a competition that goes right across the board.
Yeah.
Anyone, any age, any level of ability,
Yeah.
and you can get to the top.
Yeah. And of course there's different types of bowls as well. There's a game called boccia, which is still a Paralympic sport, and is played by people with more severe disabilities, normally CPs or those with have had a severe stroke.
So in case anyone's wondering that or thinking that you come across to bowls for a quiet life, you're in your 30s, you're marching towards, or you're still a very young man, but you're marching towards middle age. Not the case at all, because within a few short years, you're off to the Paralympics.
Yeah.
So how did you get in that very fast curve from playing club level in say, the Midlands, right through to being entered for the Paralympics?
It's via the National Disabled organisation that we belong to. When an international comes along, they are allowed to nominate the people that they want to put forward to take part in a Paralympic or a World Championships. That's how it came about.
And was it quite early on in your bowls career that you thought, I'm quite good at this, I'm going to go for the big win, the big prize?
Well, yeah, you have to, don't you?
Yeah, because you're a competitive man, as we said earlier.
Yeah.
Right, you're off to the Paralympics.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What's it like? You get chosen.
That was the first one that the able-bodied and the disabled, like Paralympics and Olympics, were held at the same location. This one was 1988 in Seoul. So we flew out, the disabled section flew out all together. That was interesting. We all had to meet at Heathrow as everybody got their passports.
Photo calls and the press there.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah,
Was that exciting?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, it was the first one.
And then you arrive in Seoul.
Yeah.
What happens then?
And then you're basically taken to the village, exactly the same as the able-bodied had at the Olympics.
Lots of security.
Yeah, then escorts along the road. Yeah, police escorts.
Was that for a youngster growing up in Birmingham? You're in your 30s now, and you're in police escorts racing down highways in
that was the second
South
time.
Korea.
When I entered the Paralympics, when I was doing the other sports, that was in New York, which wasn't the same as the able-bodied. There was actually police escorts there as well. So it's all very exciting, for somebody else,
Well,
just
good.
going into the sport.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
And tell us about the medals that you've won in your bowls career now, going back
Right.
those 30 years.
Okay, at the 1990, I think you mentioned early on that I won a gold, a couple of silvers and a bronze. That was the one that was held in Birmingham. That was exciting because that was the first World Championships. It was in our home city, very interesting. But then I've been to Adelaide, didn't win a medal there. Again, first time I'd been that far. I thought that was wonderful, Adelaide. We did the Seoul one. I've been to South Africa. That was an invitation to the South African Nationals. Just missed out for a medal there in the pairs. Done another World Championships in Australia, Sydney. I would have gone to New Zealand this year in the World Championships, but I'd have knee surgery. So I missed out on that one.
But I believe that you see the pinnacle of your career as last year's Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, by far. Purely because it was held. Everything was done, the selection, everybody was together, able-bodied and disabled. Everything was done exactly the same. You didn't feel you're this one party and now another party. We were all one. And that was why, for me, it's been the best so far.
And do you think, looking back at your career, and I know you've had the great support of your wife, Kim,
Yeah.
for nearly 30 odd years.
Yeah, 33.
And so looking back over these years, do you think that disability in 2015 is very different to the way it was in the 60s and the 70s?
Yeah, purely because it's taken seriously now. I think the general public now, especially after 2012, realise that disabled athletes of all sports put in as much, if not more, effort and training to get to where they are as their able-bodied counterparts.
And did you follow much what's going on in education as well, and what the schools are doing now? And do you ever talk to youngsters and give them a bit of advice and encouragement?
I've actually only ever given one public talk, and that was to a ladies group. That was very interesting.
Why was it interesting?
Well, because it was the first one I'd done. I had my daughter with me, and she was turning the pages.
Yes.
So when she wasn't quick enough with the pages, I was telling her, you just can't get the staff. Obviously cracking jokes because.
Well, I know you've got a great sense of humour.
But the two most important things to me is humour and independence. I have to make sure that I can do everything I can do for myself, because there's always going to be a time when somebody's not going to be there to help you, and that's when you're going to be stuck. And I try not to get myself in one of those situations. And as regards humour, I think if you can break the ice with the humour, then that's good for everybody.
Well, Bob, I know that this is the first full television interview you've given, so thank you very much indeed for talking to us, and thank you for your life story.
No problem.